train therapists and I also train parents, and I specialize in treating children with autism and oral sensory motor therapy for feeding and speech clarity. I've done a few international certifications, which include flow time approach, SOS approach to feeding, sensory motor approach to feeding, prompt from the Prompt Institute, sensory integration, and oral placement therapy. So these are some of the certifications I've completed and I want to share with you, so you know based on what I'm going to take this course through. So whatever I'm sharing here is evidence-based and thoroughly researched, and I'm not sharing anything that is not evidence-based. So when you're taking information, you know fully well that this information can be relied upon. So today we'll be talking about what is echolalia, why does it occur, what are the signs and symptoms, and if it can be managed well, and practical tips for home management. So I will be concising all these aspects very comprehensively, and I've made it very simple for parents to understand. So I've converted whatever is complex and academic into simple and practical way of working with your children at home. So before we see what is echolalia, we're going to understand more on what is autism. A brief about autism. I know you all know autism fully well, but I want to take you all back to the core deficits in autism, which result in echolalia. So what is autism? Autism is a complex developmental disorder involving just a second, involving delays in and problems with social interaction, language, and a range of emotional, cognitive, motor, and sensory abilities. So this is what autism is, and we all know that there are difficulties in social interaction, in language, and range of emotional, cognitive, and sensory aspects. If you see all three domains, that is difficulty with social interaction, language, and range of emotional, cognitive, motor, and sensory abilities, in all these three major core deficits, language is a part of it. You need language for social interaction, you need language to talk, communicate, you need language to think, you think language. So when I think, okay, after the webinar, I'm going to go for a walk with my son, I'm thinking language in my mind, and I'm using language structures to, to segment what I'm thinking or connect what I'm thinking. So we all need language, and language is a core skill for children with autism. So with this, we also need to understand that what we see on the outside as bodily spinning, lining up toys, repeating words without apparent purpose or meaning has underlying challenges. And children with autism have difficulty in relating, thinking, and communicating. Echolalia is a lot to do with communication, right? So in order to understand echolalia more in depth, we must understand that there are a set of underlying challenges that is seen in children with autism, which is why the child has echolalia. And if we want the child to be able to communicate, we want the child to think, we want the child to relate. I'm going to emphasize certain points from the start to the finish. And the reason I'm going to do this deliberately is so that you don't forget it. Even if you forget anything, what I'm going to constantly repeat, I hope you don't forget, because those are core skills that we're going to build our children in. What is echolalia? Individuals with autism spectrum disorders may echo the utterances of others in the environment, which includes people, their own utterances, audio, video, media, what they've seen or watched on a television screen, what they've heard over someone's conversation, or they've heard a song playing in the background, or what they have read. They can echo any of these aspects into their day-to-day lives, and that's what we perceive as echolalia, basically echoing what was already heard. Now, echolalia can be delayed or immediate. Immediate echolalia has these this as a definition, and I'm going to explain this to you. The term immediate echolalia applies to echoic utterances produced within two conversational turns of the original. For example, I ask the child, "How are you?" And the child in return asks me, "How are you?" Now that is within two conversational turns, and that clearly defines echolalia, which is immediate. Number two, resemble the original segmentally or suprasegmentally. Now I'm going to ask the child, I'm going to give you an example for that. I'm asking the child, "Hi, how are you?" All right, I had a different suprasegmental here. That is prosody. It's a way of talking that I had. "Hi, how are you today?" That's a way that I asked the question. And if the child would reply to me and say, "Hi, how are you today?" He is repeating the segments of the question, the words that are segmented, and he's repeating those segments in the question. But if a child were to repeat after me and go, "Hi, how are you today?" He's imitating the segment as well as the suprasegment, both the segments of the statement as or the question, as well as the form in which I presented it to the child. So the child can repeat segmentally, suprasegmentally, or both. Sometimes children don't have clear speech. Then they would probably only imitate suprasegmentals, or they could segmentally go with unclear speech production. That is also echolalia. Number three, the resemblance may be rigidly exact, pure, or selectively mitigated. That is, I'm asking the child a question, "Hi, how are you today?" The child might repeat back and say, "Hi, how are you today?" That is pure, exact. And if the child says, "Hi, how are you today?" Fine. That is mitigated. There's a slight variation of the echolalia pattern where the child has variegated that, and he has made a new utterance along with the exact repetition. So that is immediate echolalia. So far we've understood autism, and we've seen what are the core deficits in autism. We've also seen what is echolalia, and now we have defined what immediate echolalia is. Child is able to repeat what you've said within two conversations. He's going to repeat you segmentally or suprasegmentally. See, I'm changing my tone. Or the child might keep it pure and give you the exact of what you just said. Or probably he could add on an additional phrase or a unit and mitigate that echolalia. So that is immediate echolalia. Delayed echolalia. The term delayed echolalia applies to echoic utterances produced more than two conversational turns after the original. For example, I tell the child, "Hi, how are you today?" And the child answers, "I'm fine, thank you." Then you ask the child, "How was your vacation?" And if the child says, "Hi, how are you today?" that is delayed echolalia. It's gone more than two conversations, firstly. Second, it could also be repeated after a prolonged period of time. Okay, it can go after several days, after several weeks, months, or even after several years. The child could probably repeat this echoic utterance, and that is delayed echolalia. Delayed echolalia is either characterized by a higher level of linguistic complexity than the individual could generate independently, or identified as learned routine by familiar communication partners. So the immediate communication partners will know that this is a learned routine for him. It's not necessarily that the child has higher language skills. I recently was doing teletherapy session, and there was this boy who was taking sessions with us as a team. So it was one of my therapists doing the therapy, and I was there for a tele supervision, and I was supervising this online therapy session that was happening. So my therapist and I were interacting with this boy, and he wasn't really interested because he was using his system to play games, and he loves video games. And all of a sudden there is a therapist sitting there and interacting, and he really didn't want to interact with the therapist. Rather, he wanted to do video games with his system. So what I did was I had this Lego toy of my son, a Lego car, and I brought it near the screen and I showed him through the screen. And that caught his attention. He loves Legos and he looked at it and he was trying to touch it. So then his mom said he's trying to touch the Lego toy through the screen. And then the therapist asked the child, why don't you ask auntie to give it to you? And immediately he said, Auntie, could I please have the toy? That was amazing, beautiful language with all grammatical structures built in. But this is not how he necessarily communicates for general conversations. And the reason he used such a beautiful fragmented statement was he was taught to request if he needed something in that specific pattern. Could you please give me the toy? Could you please give me the bread? Could you please give me a book? Could you please give me the computer? So in this way, he's memorized it. So he has used a set of utterances that he typically uses to gain the adult's attention or request for something. And the beauty is he used it exactly in a right manner. So delayed echolalia oftentimes is quite meaningful, contextual, and children bring what they've heard some time before and put it in a new context and try to generalize it. Similarly, if you were to ask a child, what did you do yesterday? And if the child wanted to say that he went for a walk, he might ask you, can we go for a walk? Probably his parents asked him, can we go for a walk? And when you ask him a question, what did you do yesterday? He's probably bringing what his parents asked him. And he's trying to answer you by saying, I went for a walk yesterday. Okay, this is how you see delayed echolalia in children with autism. They use a previous set of words or utterances in a new context, trying to communicate something. But there are times that it could go without being understood by the communication partner, which is the listener. And these echolalic utterances could also be pure. It could be exactly what the parent asked him, or it could be mitigated, like how I told about the child. He asked me, could you please give me the car? He could also mitigate and say, could you please give me the toy? Could you please give me the computer? So that is mitigated. I hope I was clear so far. If you understood what I said, I don't know if I'll be able to see your responses. I would like to see your responses. Give me a thumbs up if you understood so far, and then I'll move to the next. You can put it in the chat column or you can put it on your screens. Great. Okay, okay. I see 5 people have really understood it. Okay. If you have any questions and if you've not understood anything, please leave it in the comment box and I will look into it and answer you towards the end of the webinar. Okay, with this, we are moving into, is it good or is it bad? So what do you think? Is it good or is it bad? If you think echolalia is good, you're going to give a thumbs up. If you think echolalia is bad, you're going to give a thumbs down for good and for bad. Okay, thank you. Ms. Satya, thank you. Suman Maji, thank you. Manjushri Pani, thank you. Urvashi, Joanna, thank you. Thank you, Sucharita. Thank you, Nabnita. All right, Joanna, thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your responses. We're going to explain and understand more about if it is good or bad just right now. All right. Echolalia, many of us think is bad, and that's exactly what even I did think when I was a fresher and I was only a student. So I would like to bring this a story of a child that I worked with who had autism. For whatever reason, I was so inclined to working with children on the autism spectrum, even when I was a student. I have had children hitting me, slapping me, spitting on me, but I still love them. And I knew that there was much more than what I saw on the outside. So there was this boy who had echolalic utterances, and as a student, I was supervised by my principal at that time. And so I spoke to her about this child constantly repeating whatever I asked him or whatever I said in the session. And whenever the child repeated whatever I asked, or whenever the child repeated a question without giving an answer, it made me feel restless and inadequate as a therapist. It made me feel that I'm not doing the right thing, and I felt kind of helpless. I did not know how to deal with it because that's not how I typically see any other child talk to me. So I could not comprehend the underlying processes at that point in time. So I went back to my supervisor and I asked her, how do I help this child? So she recommended me to another department in my institute and said, please check with the supervisor there. So I went to that supervisor and I spoke to her, and she supposedly was working with a lot of children at that time who had an autism spectrum for a diagnosis. And this is what she asked me to do. She told, if the child is going to repeat everything and then give you an answer, you have to place your finger on the child's lips and stop him and then get him to say the word fully to you. And I went back and I tried that several times, but it really did not work. So at that point in time, like many of you who think echolalia is bad, I also thought echolalia was bad. I also felt helpless and uncomfortable when children repeated, because as a therapist, I felt that I wasn't able to train the therapist to talk like you and I. And if you are a parent or a parent professional here, and if you think echolalia is bad, that's perfectly fine, because we all start that way. But the good news is echolalia is good. Okay, echolalia is good because it helps the child listen, perceive, and bring back words he's heard in his memory. And probably in a little while, he's going to use that meaningfully with you. Okay, so far we've seen what is echolalia, we've seen the types of echolalia, and now we have understood echolalia actually is a good thing. But what we are going to do is modify and help the child use meaningful language through echolalia. Just as we've seen what is echolalia, we must definitely understand what is not echolalia. Because if we are mistaken in this understanding of what is and what is not, we can be at a high risk of doing the wrong thing with the children. So let's understand what is not echolalia. Non-linguistic vocalizations. When I say linguistic, it's to do with language. When I say non-linguistic, there's no language involved there. So the child is humming, laughing, crying, whistling, or making sounds like burping, tickling, a tick like squeals, or screaming, grunting, hooting, all of this which has no linguistic component or language component or a true word in it, they are not echolalia. Okay, these are not echolalia, and we don't treat non-linguistic vocalizations the same way as we do echolalia. In fact, the word treatment to echolalia in itself is not right. It's more to do with managing echolalia. Okay.
Chitra, I just want to interrupt you for 5 minutes. Just one second.
Yes.
If all the parents could just rename their username as the same name that they registered with, because we're trying to tally whether whether you've made it or not. So please change your username to the name you registered with, or you can either message Bani, Ambika, and I to change it for you, and we'll do it for you. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Chitra, please continue.
Yeah. Now we need to understand two subcategories under the heading of unconventional verbal behavior that may overlap with echolalia, which are perseverative speech and incessant questioning. Now, these two can overlap with echolalia, but they are not necessarily echolalia, okay? One is perseverative speech. Perseverative speech consists of speech that is repeated persistently over time. sometimes to the exclusion of other utterances, comprises either delayed echolalia or self-generated language, and may or may not reflect comprehension or communicative intent. When a child keeps repeating the same thing over and over again, for example, there was this child that I saw who is sitting with his parents in a restaurant, and he picks up the menu card and he starts reciting the restaurant name over and over and over again. He wasn't bringing any communication here. He was just reciting that restaurant name repetitively. He wasn't communicating with the parent, or he wasn't trying to say what he wants inside, but he went on with it, like say for 20-25 minutes constantly. Now that is perseverative speech. This is typically seen in children with autism. This kind of perseverative speech is not echolalia. Second, incessant questioning. This involves repeated queries, either echoic or self-generated, with clear intent to communicate and persisting. Just a second. Yep. Involves repeated queries, either echoic or self-generated, with clear intent to communicate and persisting even though a communication partner has answered. So basically, the child is asking you a question and he goes on with that question even after you have answered that question and given him an answer. You also see this in children who are typically developing. They ask you the same question over and over again, probably because they have not got the answer that they are looking for. And with children on the autism spectrum, at times this can get really obsessive. I did have a child who I used to work with in-person sessions, and he would go on asking, can I play building blocks? Can I play building blocks? Even while he was playing building blocks, at times he would go on repeating the same thing over and over again. I'm giving you an example of what is incessant questioning. I'm not giving you a treatment strategy for incessant questioning as of now. We will look through echolalia further on. And as I talk about echolalia, you will be able to figure out answers for most of what we've discussed as of now. But if any of your question or your thought is not answered, we'll keep it for the last for the question answer time. Okay, now we are going to see why children with autism echo. So I've put both together, immediate echolalia as well as delayed echolalia. Sometimes children with echolalia or children with autism echo because they want to understand what the speaker is saying more better. So if I'm asking the child, what's your name? And the child says, what's your name, Avishai? That's probably because he's trying to comprehend the question I have just asked him. What's your name? What's your name? Some children repeat it 2-3 times before they give out an answer. And the child is trying to process that auditory information that he's just received. And if you understand the underlying processes in autism, you'll also know that children with autism have auditory processing difficulty. They don't process auditory information more like you and I, and there could be subtle differences in their auditory processing. And this subtle difference, maybe a microsecond or a nanosecond, well, I don't know the seconds so precisely, that variation for them to hear and reach their brain, the information, they have probably missed out on something, or they have not comprehended language the way you and I do. Right? Sometimes someone asks you a question. For example, when I ask my husband or my son to do something, I've just probably asked them, get me a mug of water. What did you want? A mug of water. They have actually understood what I have asked, but they are reprocessing it, probably because they were doing something else along with what I was saying. And they're trying to reprocess the question before they get the answer. And they themselves give you the answer. And I'd be like, oh, how many times these people keep repeating the same thing over and over again? I have to tell them 10 times, you know, I'm sure many of you would have had such experiences, especially if there are males around in the house. You may have to repeat certain things twice or even more. And there is a brain science why males have difficulty in comprehension as compared to females. Um, but with children on the autism spectrum, it's a lot more severe. It's a lot more severe, for which they need to restate what they have heard to ensure that they have comprehended that auditory information before they give you the answer. Number two, allow time to process what was said and generate an answer. Same thing. One is understand what the speaker is saying. Second thing is process that information and generate an answer, and then provide you with an answer. What is not complex for us is, typically developing can be complex for children on the autism spectrum. Number three, interaction. They like to be present with someone and interact, and they're letting you know that they are listening and they want to engage with you. That's amazing, right? When I was a student, like I told you some time back, I did not actually understand that the child was trying to engage with me. That was the first client that I worked with autism. I was actually not sure what I was doing. I was overwhelmed, but as I went on working with children more and more in the autism spectrum, even before I started reading journal articles on autism and echolalia, I began seeing that probably this child is trying to interact with me. Probably he's trying to process this information, and that's why he's repeating. And when I saw that these are scientific and evidence-based, I was just excited. And I want you as parents to understand that children with autism oftentimes are actually present with you when you're asking that question, and they want to interact with you, and they're trying to let you know that, look, I'm actually listening to you. Okay. And for many children, this repetition can be self-soothing. It can help them to calm themselves down and regulate. So when probably they're meeting a new person, I have many parents say this to me. When I ask him, what's your name? He tells me his name immediately. But when a stranger asks him, what's your name? He repeats the same question again, and he doesn't look at the stranger. The stranger might not be an overwhelming visual sensory stimulation for you. The stranger may not be threatening to you. But for our children with autism, strangers can be threatening. A new voice can be uncomfortable. A person's touch can be uncomfortable because of their sensory challenges. And probably they don't want the stranger to know they have a problem. And those are some of the reasons why children don't actually make eye contact with a stranger, or they don't necessarily answer the question immediately. Rather, they keep asking the question over and over again to themselves. And an example would be like this: hey, what's your name? Hey, what's your name? Hey, what's your name? And the stranger goes again, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Chitra, you know? So the child is actually calming himself or herself. The child is trying to regulate and get all the sensory experiences under his or her control. And then the child is ready to give out an answer. Those are strategies that children use to calm themselves down when they have sensory stimuli that's coming to them, which can be visual or auditory, or just the presence of another person around them. And it can be overwhelming to the child, and the child is actually calming himself down. At other times, lastly, I don't think it's lastly, I think there's more. No, it's the last one. At other times, it can be more fun. Children love to repeat what you say. Probably they're trying to play with you, or they like the way that sounds. They like the sound patterns in that, and they're just going on repeating over and over again. For example, there was this child who loved that cockadoodle song, and he would just keep going cock-a-doodle doo. He's just repeating that and enjoying the way it sounded. I would also like to bring another point here, that even children who are typically developing do use these kind of repetitions when they are actually happy. And that could be more of a delayed echolalia, and it can also be immediate. And Prasant et al. In 2006, it's an evidence-based scientific research study paper where he says echolalia is a positive prognostic indicator. If a child is echoing, it is simply a sign that the child is progressing in his language skills. I'm going to play a video, Aishwarya. I'm going to play a video now. And I want parents to carefully comment in the chat box and let me know what did you understand from the video and why do you think the child was having this echolalic repetitions. You can give your answer, whatever you think. There's nothing like right or wrong. We all are right. We all are also wrong at times. So it's perfectly fine. Yes, he played with the mother. Enjoying himself for fun. Immediate echolalia, just for fun. He was playing, yes. Same, repeat whatever mother speaks, yes. Trying to repeat and rehearsal, yes. Child want to interact with mom, fantastic. Kid is repeating, great, fantastic. You all have got it in your sounds, and he's actually calming himself down and having so much of fun with his mother. He just wants to be with his mother and enjoy themselves and have loads of fun with the family. So that's what's going on. He's fully aware that his father is taking the video on the other side, and he was jumping meaninglessly before the mother started this conversation with him. But after the mother started the conversation, if you noticed, he stopped meaninglessly jumping up and down, and he picked the call and he started walking up and down like how we big people, grown-ups, walk around and talk over the phone. He started doing that, right? So he was having a great time with his family. I'm going to also share this video again with you. We're going to go into the management. At that time, again, I'm going to share with before we understand what we must do to help children with autism in order to cope with their echolalia, we need to understand what we must not do. Okay, what we must not do is we must avoid teaching a rote set of functional or survival utterances which are less flexible. So there are some management techniques or certain therapy formats or therapy approaches that actually teach children written scripts, and they teach children in a rote manner. So there was this child that I worked with. They were attending therapy elsewhere and they started sessions with me later on. And this child was at the basic word level. She still not yet started communicating with us. She barely had, say, about 100 words. And she wasn't ready to connect two words together. But the previous therapist had already worked on WH questions. What is your name? My name is so and so. What did you have for breakfast? I ate so and so for breakfast. How old are you? I am so and so years old. So the child basically was not ready, has not comprehended the WH questions, but it was already taught because the parent apparently had requested the therapist to help so that when a stranger comes, talks, and connects with the child has an answer all the time. So but then when parents brought the child to me, I explained to them why the child was not at that level and why the child must not be using it at that point in time. So like I said, we all are learning. If I had met the child probably 15 years or 16 years down the line, even I would have done the same thing, teaching the child a set of questions and answers. But over the years, with all this understanding and experience and working with children, parents, and doing all these courses has really helped me understand more in depth of what autism is and what we must not do. So the first thing in terms of management is what you should not do. Don't teach a set of functional utterances or utterances just to maintain conversations. If your stranger friend or if your family member is not able to understand your child, it's their problem. That's not your problem. You don't have to make your child work hard memorizing a set of things for which he's not really ready to impress somebody who don't really even care about you or your family. right? If there are people who really care about you, I don't think you would try to get your child to impress them. Say, for example, it's your mother. You wouldn't try to get your child learn a bunch of things to impress your mother, because you know that your mom, for example, maybe, may not be, understands your child and loves your child no matter what, right? So don't try to impress people who are not going to really be with you or your child in any way. And if they don't understand your kid, it's their problem. Okay, that's one way of thinking and looking at it. The other thing is, if somebody is not able to comprehend your child's challenges, second one is to coach them, train them, educate them, let them know what autism is, let them know what are the challenges that your child with autism is facing, let them know what as a parent you're going through, and sensitize the people around you. And that's exactly what we need to do, sensitize people. Let's not change our children, because by trying to change our children, by trying to teach them a set of survival utterances, we're actually going to induce a lot of anxiety in the child. That in turn can lead to emotional dysregulation, and emotional dysregulation can lead to more echolalic utterances and other behavioral challenges. Okay, so first we have learned what we will not do. We will not create or generate a set of utterances for a child. If the people around our child is not able to understand our child, then we are going to educate them, bring them into our world, our child's world, and help them understand what autism is. Okay, so I'm going to give you this example. Like I mentioned earlier, we started the slide. Let me go back with what we see on the outside versus what are the underlying challenges, right? We saw the underlying challenges are to do with relating, thinking, and communicating, isn't it? So if this is your underlying challenge in autism, then that's what we need to really work on before we try to fix just what is on the surface area. Okay. By focusing on the underlying processes or stabilizing the foundation, we actually address the symptoms more effectively and with more lasting effect, right? So when we are trying to address the underlying challenges which are resulting in these behavioral issues or resulting in echolalia, we are going to create a long-lasting effect in the child. So if the core challenges is relating, thinking, and communicating, what should we be doing? We need to be helping the child cope with relating, thinking, and communicating. Just treating echolalia on the surface level is not going to help. It's like this. If there's a child who has a problem of constantly tripping and falling, what do? We help the child hold the hand and we help the child walk, right? So in that manner, we are helping the child depend on us and walk without tripping. This is one way of working. The other way of working is strengthen the child's legs so that he will not trip and fall. Which one would you go for? One, help the child to walk holding his hands. Number two, strengthen the child's legs so he will not trip and fall. I will go for number two. I'd rather strengthen the child's legs and help the child to walk independently, even without me, rather than the child always looking at me or depending on me, right? So that's what I will do. So if a child with autism has echolalia, you treat the underlying processes, strengthen what is weak, relating, thinking, and communicating. When I say relating, the child with autism needs to relate with you as a mother, as a caregiver, play with you. We saw in that video how beautifully the mom and son had a great time together, and the dad is sitting there and admiring the way they are playing with each other, right? That's relating. The child was relating with his mom and he was having a ball of time with his mother. That's relating. I'm going to also show you that video again where the child thinks and gives a different answer. Thinking, the child needs to think or the child needs to have a plan in order to put words over there. right? And language and thinking go hand in hand. So for the children with autism that we are dealing with, or if that's your child, you will help the child build these core skills: relating, thinking, communicating. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to repeat this over and over again so that it stays in you forever. Okay. I would like to tell you the story of Akansh. Akansh was brought to me when he was 4 years and 10 months old by his mother. And until then, he did not take any speech and language therapy sessions at all. And after he started attending sessions with me, and until then, there was no speech, absolutely no speech. He would use gestures like push things away or show frown when he didn't like it. But after a few months, a couple of months or so, he started picking up language. And he just had one or two word utterances and a combination of that. At that point, we left Bangalore and we had moved to Chennai to live there for a while. And we lived in Chennai for about 2 years and then we came back. When I came back, I got to get in touch with Akansh's family and they brought Akansh to me. By this time, Akansh had learned short sentences, but there was constant echolalia, in the sense it was like to a degree that was very severe. He would repeat every question or every answer. He wasn't able to think, pause, and repeat. And Akansh had the ability of by hearting the whole movie song together. He learned to read Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, Hindi, and English. He learned to read them because he's visually so strong. His grandparents watched TV and he learned to read all of it from watching the TV channels that they played at his home. So this is the amount of memory that he had, and he could read entire big, huge paragraphs. He could recite the entire movie dialogue without a problem. But when we wanted to communicate with Akansh, it was so difficult for Akansh to give me a give and take or a conversation skill. But what I did with Akansh was I never tried to break that echolalia pattern, because by now I had got some amount of experience and I understood he's trying to interact, relate, and communicate. I let it be and I started strengthening Akansh's receptive language. So strengthening language skills is number one. And the reason I bring in short stories is because stories will stay with you for a longer time and you will be able to remember strengthening language skills forever. So, first point is strengthening language skills. So, improve their receptive language. Try working on that with your speech language pathologist. And now I also want parents to understand that when you are doing these sessions, you would go with your speech language pathologist who works with you on the right receptive language, the right expressive language. Now you have special educators who help you work with academic self-help, skills of daily living. You have OTs that work on the sensory integration and other sensory processing challenges in the gross motor, fine motor, and the physical setup. So please understand what your therapist is doing and work accordingly. Because in my absence, Akansh was definitely undergoing a couple of other therapies, but nowhere he was able to strengthen his receptive language skills. So you must know who to go to for what. Please be careful on that. There's so much of information out there, and there are people who even say you don't need therapists at all, you can do it on your own. Even that is not right. So be careful how you're working with your child and help your child progress through. That should be your understanding. So number one, strengthen the child's language skills. Number two, look at body language and connect the echolalia. Now, for example, you're asking your child, what do you want? He's saying, what do you want? And he is looking at the door or he's looking at a mug. Probably he's trying to say he wants to go out of the door, or maybe he's trying to say he wants that mug of water that you have. So try to understand body language when the child is having an echolalic utterance. In that way, you're going to help the child comprehend that he can communicate, and that in itself will build more language. Okay, so you're going to ask the child, what do you want? Your child says, what do you want? And looks at the mug, and you say, oh, you're looking for this mug, you want some water, here you go. So you go and give it to the child and let the child take the mug of water. And when he knows that you have understood, and he's going to try new ways of interacting and communicating with you. However, if you're going to stop and say, don't say what do you want, say I want water. See, there's already a barrier there, and he's going to start thinking that whatever I'm saying is wrong anyways. I might as well not say anything at all. Anxiety is going to go up, emotional dysregulation is going to go up, more echolalic utterances will come. Okay, so try to connect the child's body language and connect it to his echolalic utterance, figure out what the child wants, and help him out. Another way of doing it is, once you have understood he wants a mug of water, you can go behind the child and then say next to him, I want water. And he's going to echo that as well. He's going to say, I want water. And then you give him the water, move to the other side. So he figures out, okay, so if I want water, I need to say, I want water. And once he learns this, he's going to use it in different contexts to communicate more meaningfully. Engage individuals or children with autism in age-appropriate joint attention routines that vary in terms of subjects, actions, location, and objects. So when I say joint attention, what I mean here is you and the child are interacting together with regard to the same object. Say, for example, I have a mug here, all right? And I want to talk about the mug. I have a mug that is white in color. And if a child is engaging with you, he's going to look at the mug. Probably he's going to smile, or he's going to try to take it from you. That is joint attention. He's trying to interact with one object along with you. And intermittently, he might look at you. So he is connecting with the object as well as connecting with you as a person. So that is joint attention. So what we need to do for children with autism is create opportunities to build these age appropriate joint attention. And the reason I have specified here age appropriate is because for a child who's at a single word level or two word level, or a child whose cognitive skills are where he can understand probably building blocks, or maybe he can understand a toy car, or a girl who understands Barbie dolls, you work on just that. You can't move to higher levels of interactions where you ask the child to do some cleaning chores. Probably your child at that point is not ready for it. Right? So similarly, according to age and according to the child's interest, that's very, very important. The child's interest is so important, and you need to give attention to that. Help the child to have interactions with you. I shared this example last time also when I was doing a teletherapy session. I had a child who wasn't paying attention, and he was mouthing everything that he had around. And I found a pen next to me and I started mouthing that, and I made some noises. The child looked at me and he got so excited, and he started interacting with me by putting things in the mouth. And eventually he took out that object that was in his mouth and he started relating with me. So that's how you work on relating. Do what the child is doing. I'll say it again. Do what the child is doing. If he is, taking some water and rubbing it on the floor, you take some water, you rub it on the floor with him. That's going to draw his attention to you. In that way, when he knows mama loves what I do, he's going to try to explore more and more and more. And what he starts off with basics, what he starts off with things that are meaningless can eventually open doors to meaningful utterances or to meaningful engagement with you. So the key number 3 is age appropriate joint attention. Do whatever your child is doing And when you do that, and when you're going to imitate, you're going to accept him. And when he knows you're accepting him, he's going to try new things. During that time, when you introduce language, you will not see much of a repetitive speech. And even if you have a repetitive speech, eventually the child will be able to use comprehensible speech. I'm going to show you that video that we saw again, and I'm going to show how the child variegates his echolalia and how he expresses his need to his parents. I will come to that, but now we'll go to 4. So when 4, facilitate verbal initiations. So now you understood that you have to engage the child, you have to imitate the child, accept him or her, and do whatever the child is doing. Basically, take the child's leave. That's what flow time strongly addresses. And I learned so much through these certificate courses on autism that engagement is the key. Keeping the child motivated is the key. And all the more important is the child's intrinsic motivation, what he loves to do the most. You use that to build language. So facilitate verbal initiations. So you have a toy car, and the child is probably meaninglessly playing with his toy car, and he's not really looking at you. He's busy looking at the wheels that are spinning. You take a toy car and spin your car's wheel along with him until he looks at your car or he looks at you. At that, you're going to bang his car and say, "Bush," or any crazy word you want to use. Trust me, your child will start interacting in that manner. And this is something that I did with Akansh. Akansh did not know how to play. And from the time I taught him to play with a toy car, he started finding cars wherever he could. And he loved building blocks. And I taught him to build a bridge. And he started building a variety of bridges, not just that one bridge, a variety of bridges. And he would get his car under the bridge, over the bridge. And then I initiated speech sounds, trrr, dish, and all of those. He picked up all of those speech sounds, and that's how Akansh began building language. So this is how you initiate a verbal imitation with a child who's not using vocalization or linguistic units in terms of imitating you during this joint attention play. Number 5, facilitate low constraint interaction styles among communication partners. The 5th tip is your interaction with the child, earlier I told you, should be age appropriate. It should be low constraint on the child. So you need to also understand to what extent you can do that activity. Now, I can't do playing that game with Akansh the entire 40-minute session that I did with him. He's going to get bored. So you need to understand what really interests and work on it only up to that point. Don't go beyond what the child can take. Understanding the child's body cues are very important to know their level of tolerance and how much you can go ahead working on certain areas. Number 6, sixth step, provide many opportunities to practice, especially with peers. If they don't have a peer, you can have their sibling. If they don't have a sibling, I encourage parents to have a pet at home, especially if it's a dog, which is very communicative. They try and interact a lot with their pets, and that'll help them to build language. And there is a lot of research also on having pets and language building in children with autism. Number 7, identify, identify, preserve, and strengthen patterns of social closeness. So once you identify what the child loves doing the most in terms of engagement, see, now all of this you have to see in the eye of treating echolalia or managing echolalia. And what I'm trying to reiterate here is building engagement with the child. Keeping the child motivated to communicate is the key. Of course, yes, building receptive language is super, super, super important, because unless and until the child comprehends what you're going to say, they're going to constantly keep repeating whatever they are hearing from you. Okay, so while you're working on building language, use this step. Identify and preserve and strengthen the patterns of social closeness. Probably some children like roughhousing, like coming and falling on you all the time. They like to push you. They like to do pillow fights with you. They like to do cycling. So see what in the child brings that social closeness with you. and try to preserve that. First is you need to identify what is that. Number two, you need to preserve that strength and build on that strength. And when you follow these steps, trust me, you're going to have a lot of doors open to meaningful language that you can build with a child. And that's why I put that image. I really love this image, different doors opening into the other. So this is exactly what we want to do with children on the autism spectrum, is manage echolalia in a way that is socially interactive, building language skills in terms of understanding, engaging the child socially, communicating, connecting, allowing the child to take the lead. That really helps you to open more doors in the child learning meaningful language. Again, this is another research study that I was looking through. The modeling must be engaging, playful, and it must match the interests of the child. Like I mentioned to you, I'm going to share the video again, and this time you're going to see how the echolalia varies for this little fellow. Aishwarya, I'm going to play the video, Aishwarya. I hope you're taking note. I have another video to show. Aishwarya, I'm getting another video. Please did just that. All right. So we're done for the day. I've spoken about introduction to echolalia. What is echolalia? Why children echo? And what are the different types of echolalia? What is not echolalia? And what are the management strategies that we need to use in terms of echolalia? I think,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, we'll take like a 10-minute break right now so you can recuperate and drink water or anything. And parents will be sending you a feedback form. If you could please fill it up, and then once that is done, then we'll start asking the questions. So please
Okay.
do leave your questions in the chat.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
So we rejoin in 10 minutes, is it? 4:28? How does?
You don't have to rejoin.
Okay.
We'll just stay on the session.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, while all of you are filling the feedback form, we were trying to we were looking at all the participants who are here, and we have a record of who all are attending it. We find one person, someone by the name Shabana Yasmin. Could you please text us in private? We just wanted to get a few confirmations from you, please. Thank you. We have left you a message, but I wasn't sure if you were checking your messages. Could you please just text us in private? You could text Aishwarya back in private, please. Thank you.
Also, if anyone's having any problem with opening the feedback form, do let us know. We'll start in another 10 minutes, so please do fill up the feedback form. Like I mentioned before the webinar, we have peer support groups, so if you want to be added in that, you can indicate that on the form. Yeah, just let us know if you have any problems. Please do fill up the feedback form. Also, leave your questions in the chat. We'll be asking them after in another 4 minutes. And once your question is asked, then you can unmute yourself and expand on it more. But other than that, if all the other parents could please remain on mute, we'll really appreciate it. Thank you. I think we can start the form.
Hello? Hello, you're not audible. I know you're saying something, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, I said we'll start the Q&A session.
Yes, please.
Okay, so how this will work is I'll read out the question and then the parent will unmute themselves and kind of elaborate.
Okay.
Okay. The first question is from Suchitra. She said, what if I uttered the word happy and my son said happa? This is not the exact word I pronounced, but that's okay. Suchitra, could you unmute yourself and expand on that question, please? Hello, Chitra?
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
Is the parent there?
Hello.
I think probably your parent is not understood. Is it Sucharita? I think there's a question. I say happy and the child says happer. I'll give you an
Yes.
answer. If you've not got the answer to your question, you can rephrase it. So you're talking about you saying happy and the child is not being able to repeat happy with clarity, and the child says happer. So
Yes.
here, what we are looking at is more of he is able to repeat the word that you said, but the clarity is not in place. So don't worry about clarity right away, because we need to work on clarity depending on the oral motor strengthening and any oral sensory challenges that are underlying. So if the child is using unclear speech or a speech which is not precisely clear, just like the way you said, mostly it's because that's an oral sensory or an oral motor challenge that needs to be addressed. So what I always recommend parents and therapists is, I tell them not to work on speech clarity when the child is at a single word level. What happens when you work on speech clarity at a single word level is a child loses his confidence to find more new words because he thinks whatever he's saying is wrong, because the tendency
Okay.
to correct him when he's going wrong, because we think they have to say clear speech. But allow them to say, even if it's just a single sound for happy, even if they say ha, that's fine, or the child says pee, that's fine, because we need the child to be able to form short sentences before we address speech clarity. If we try and address speech clarity early on, there's a high risk that the child might even lose what he already have in his repertoire, or the progress can be very, very slow because we are instilling questions in the child if he's actually right or wrong. Okay.
Okay.
Speech clarity, we will work after the child gets to 3 to 4 word combinations of sentences. Did
Okay.
I answer your
Thank you.
question? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. The next question is from Dana. She said, "What if the echolalia is from the TV in response to questions from people?"
Okay. So, for example, you're saying that you are asking a question and the child is giving you an answer that he's watched on the television, but he's definitely answering you, right? Is he answering the specific question correctly?
No, he isn't.
He isn't. He's just giving some random answer, some random thing that he's heard on the television, right? Is that what he's saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a clear situation where the child is trying to interact with you. He knows you're asking him something. He knows he has to respond to you, but doesn't know the right answer to give. Say,
Okay.
for example, you are, I don't know who's talking, but
My
I'd
video is
really love to see you all and talk, because it's so easy for me to connect that way and my words flow
low,
rather
so
than not being able to see. But that doesn't matter. Yeah, if you can unmute your video, I'll be really, really happy. But if you're not comfortable, it's okay.
comfortable. It's the bandwidth.
Oh, okay, okay, fine. So, so when a child, yes,
I
you
hope
want
I
to.
don't drop. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, hi. So
Hi.
if you are having a child here and you are asking the child a question and he gives you an answer that he's watched from the television, you're asking him, how are you today? And he says, sings a song or gives a wrote information that he's watched on the television, and you want to help the child correct this, right? So try to, work like this. I'll give you another example. You are standing near the door and you are asking your child, would you like to go out? And the child haphazardly says something. Okay. What you can do is open the door and ask the same question. Would you like to do something? And the child says, for example, we will keep it E-I-E-I-O. He's watched on the TV. And the child tells you E-I-E-I-O. And at this time, probably he is looking at the door outside and he's saying E-I-E-I-O. Like I mentioned earlier in management strategy, please see the child's body language. Try to connect his body language to the meaning of what he wants to communicate. So if the child is looking at the door and if he's still saying E-I-E-I-O, take him actually to the door. Then you ask him, would you like to go outside or would you like to stay back? And he's going to say E-I-E-I-O to you. Then you go behind the child. Okay, this is your child. And you go behind the child and or I'm the child. You go behind the child and say, take his hand in your hand and say, I want to go out. If the child can recite such a long sentence or a sentence from the TV that he's watched, he probably can do this as well. I want to go out. What you're doing here is a multimodal approach. You're giving him a tactile input, you're giving him the proprioception probably that he needs, and you're giving him an auditory input, and there's visual sensory stimuli of going out. And then the child says, I want to go out. And even if he doesn't say, if you can do this regularly, he will eventually be able to get that. What I see is probably the child doesn't have the language comprehension that he needs to answer your question meaningfully, or probably the number of words in his immediate memory are limited, or probably there's a motor planning difficulty where he hasn't understood the word outside. He's not able to motor plan because of the neural involvement here.
Okay. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Manjushri. Her question is how to help my child talk with more clarity.
Okay, I would really appreciate we stick to Echolalia today, because then I won't be able to answer all the questions. Clarity, like I mentioned sometime back, we need to understand oral motor and oral sensory aspects to help the child build clarity. Maybe some other time we'll do it.
Okay. Then we go to the next question. The next question is from Anshu. My son is not answering the question appropriately, but he will repeat the response several times.
If he's not understood the question, how will he give you a response? I didn't get the question. Can you please rephrase?
Anshu, if you could unmute yourself and bit.
Please unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, he is giving the appropriate response. For example, if we ask him, how are you? So he would say, good, 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 or, he will say it several times over. So this is the simplest example, he does it for almost everything. So what should...
So, yeah. So you're asking him a question, he gives you the right answer, but he repetitively goes on with it non-stop.
Yes.
Which is, like I mentioned to you earlier, some of these signs are not autism. Some of these signs are not echolalia, typical echolalia. It can get perseverative and go meaningless into something else. So this is when you need to engage and get the child to connect with you. Probably when he's saying good, 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 maybe he's not maintaining an eye contact with you, or maybe he's not with you in your world, and he probably is lost into his own world. I would encourage you to go quickly grab him and say, oh, you're good. I'm glad to know you're doing good. That's my boy. Give him a high five. You've engaged with him. That will stop this repetitive good, good, good.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The next question from Seema Singh. Is it right to use pronouns or proper nouns with the child? I've been using third person for both my son and myself. When is it right to use first and second person with the child?
Okay, third person actually, develops much later than first person. Children learn I and you before they learn he and she. I is first person, you is second person, he, she, they, it is third person. So you need to teach the child to use I, okay? Now, again, like I mentioned in the earlier example about the door and the child wanting to go out and go in, you stand behind the child and say, I want. So typically, if you ask a child with autism, do you want water? They have a tendency to say, do you want water? To say, I want water. Actually, they're saying, I want water, but they tend to repeat that and, question you back and say, do you want water? So what you need to do is go behind the child, take his hand in your hand and say, I want water. Quickly go in front of the child and give the water to the child and say, here you go. This is a way of working in terms of teaching children who have pronoun reversals. You can implement that. And similarly, you can have toys model like teddy bears and other toys sitting for a tea party with you, and then you have water, and then you say, it's my turn now, I want water. You sit behind the teddy bear and get that water. Do role play basically to explain I and you. And if you can sit together as a family and have turn taking and say, I have you can get any toy or something that you have around you. I have my phone here. So if you want to interact and you want to give turns with the other family members, there's father, child, and you take the lead and you say, I'm going to ask a question, and whoever says I want gets it first. And you say, who wants the phone? And the dad says, I want. You get it. Who wants the phone? The boy says, I want, and he gets it. In this way also, you can teach pronouns and you can avoid pronoun reversals. And trust me, the key for all your questions is engaging with the child. Just have fun. In fact, I would encourage all of you to put down your cell phones, to switch off the televisions, to remove all gadgets from your environment, to stop working maybe after your work time is over, and give 20 minutes to your child. Just do what they are doing and interact with them. They can be loud, they can be noisy, they can sometimes irritate you, doesn't matter. Just interact with them and see, at that point, you will see minimal echolalia and any other autism related challenges. The key is engagement. Engage with a child. Sing what he likes, do what he likes. I think this will be an answer to most of your questions. Engage. Even the other question the parent asked, the child goes on saying, good, good, good. I encourage the parent to engage the child. Same thing I would like to tell you, engage the child. Yes.
Okay, the next question is, what is the difference between echolalia and delayed speech, and how do we identify that?
Okay. Delayed speech and language is when the child doesn't speak appropriate to his age level. That's a delayed speech. Echolalia is a child keeps repeating whatever you say. Like you saw that video, the mother said hello, the child said hello, how are you, how are you? That's echolalia. And in children with autism, and even children who have a delayed speech and language, children who are typically developing also use some amount of echolalia or repetitive speech. Even we use, for that matter. I told you how my son and my husband keep asking me the same thing. You ask for water? Anything that you ask, it like, what did you say? Did you ask for this? They are actually rehearsing to ensure that they don't go wrong. So even children with delayed language, children who are typically developing, including us, we will be repeating a few things repetitively to ensure that we've got the point right. So I hope I've answered your question. If I've not, please don't hesitate to question.
How can we differentiate? Like if a child is not, there are few kids, they start speaking at the age of 4.5. And by then, if you think that it is like, is it a speech delay? Echolalia, we can easily identify that whatever you are saying, that child repeats immediately. So we can understand that. But there are few children with no speech, and they just start speaking at the age of 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then the speech continues.
Yes,
but there are few at the age of 4 till they didn't get a speech, and that may be because of autism. So how do you differentiate this thing?
Okay, nice to see you here, Satyaji. Yeah.
Hi.
So children who have who are late talkers, see, actually it's not very difficult. All you need to do is understand that children at certain age have certain amount of words in their vocabulary. For example, by the time the child is 2 years old, they must have around 200 to 300 words in their vocabulary when they're 2 to 2.5. Okay, the same thing exponentially grows when the child is 3 to 4 years of age. They have about 1,200 to 1,500 words by that time. And a child who's around 2.5 is able to combine 2 words and make short phrases. And a child who's around 3 to 4 years old is able to make 4 to 5 word sentences. So if they don't fall into this, then definitely there is a high chance that the child has delayed language. Similarly, by year 1, When child is 1 year old or earlier than that, the child has to say their first true word, first meaningful word. If that doesn't happen, the child is at a high risk to have delayed language. If I've answered your question, you can give
Yeah,
me a thumbs up.
perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Joanna, and she said, doesn't echolalia cause frustration in the child?
Definitely, if we don't interact with the child at that time and if we don't understand. Echolalia mostly causes more stress in the listener or the parent as compared to the amount of stress it will cause the child. For the child, he's actually rehearsing, he's learning, and probably he's having fun and he's learning to communicate. But for the parent, it can be very frustrating because the child you cannot understand your child. And any parent for that matter, if you can't understand your child, it's going to be very frustrating for all parents. So it's more of a challenge or a difficulty for the parent as compared to the child himself. And the child can get frustrated if you don't accept him as he is, and if you're trying to constantly change him. That can be frustrating for the child. I hope I answered your question.
Okay. Then next question is from Namnita. She said, my child has echolalia in both my mother tongue as well as English. Is this going to complicate things? How to manage it?
Okay, don't worry about mother tongue and English confusion. That's an old school of thought which says that you should have only one language in the child's speech language and communication. When two languages are introduced simultaneously, yes, there can be a slight delay, but that will not affect your child's language learning to a large extent. And if the child is having echolalia in one language, he will definitely have echolalia in another language. If a language is new, then the echolalia might be more, but otherwise it's all one and the same. Management, we've seen all the tips. If you can follow what we've discussed today, it's going to help you. Hi, Kavita. Nice to see you too.
Hi, Chitra. I had a doubt.
Yes.
Actually, my son, every day when he gets up, he asks me what is there for the breakfast. And he wants each one of us to say how many, say if it's idli, how many idlis you want. And he will go to each person and correct the details. Actually, he is not bothered about what we are saying, but he does it every day. I mean, I know, like, if it's morning, he will come and ask me this. So, is it a kind of echolalia or is it like repetition?
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense, but every day the same thing.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
my elder son gets mad of saying
Gets
the
frustrated.
answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is see what Emmanuel is trying to do here. He's trying to interact with you all. It's like saying good morning. It's like he slept the whole night and he's so happy to see you all in the morning, and he's not sure what right words he needs to use, and he is using something that is easy for him to communicate, and he's making that like a routine, and he's going on with that on a daily basis. So when you are try to interact with him and detour that and get him to interact something else. Say, for example, if he comes to you and asks, what is for breakfast? How many idlis you want? Say, today's breakfast is idli and I'm going to have 3 idlis. Can you go give this cup of water to Appa and come? So let him take a cup of water, go give to Appa and come back to you. He may ask Appa how many idlis you want. That's fine. So Appa has to interact something else along with his echolalic utterance. Have one more utterance. Build on that.
Okay.
Build on that and try to interact with him. So I'm trying to make it more meaningful for him to be able to interact with the people around him.
Okay. Actually, it's not just one question. It's like timely he has few questions which he asks in the whole day. I mean, lunchtime.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but sorry to interrupt, but we kind of, the parents put the questions in the chat, so there's a line waiting. So if you could type it, we'll come back if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the next question is from Rashmi. her question is how to manage delayed echolalia when a child uses it for fun.
How to manage delayed echolalia when the child uses it for fun. Again, the key is interact with the child. If he is singing E-I-E-I-O from Old MacDonald, which is delayed, you sing along with him and make it more meaningful for the child and have fun with the child. Probably he's trying to let you know that, look, I'm happy. Look, I'm waiting to have interaction with you, or I'm trying to sing with you, or I'm trying to play with you. Try to do a game and engage, interact, and have fun with the child. In that way, they will have new opportunities to use new language and explore new things around with you.
Okay. The next question is how can we plan goals or lessons? If should we always follow the child's lead?
Okay. I think I can read that question. Yes. So thank you for asking this question. It's a very, very important question. How can we plan goals if we always follow the child's lead? So when I'm saying follow the child's lead, I'm not telling you to do nothing but just play around with the child. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. Say, for example, if you've planned 3 things to work with a child today. One is you have planned probably playing a peekaboo game. You have planned to work something on an oral sensory motor therapy. You have planned to work on a bunch of verb cards, or you want to do verb interaction with the child. You can give the child 3 options. Do you want to do peekaboo? Or do you want to do verb cards? Or do you want to do oral motor activities? What do you want to do? So you ask the child to take the lead. For example, if the child is verbal, like, I have this little boy in my session, his name is Emmanuel. As soon as he comes to my session, I ask him, do you want to read, do you want to play, or do you want to talk? Because when I say I'm working on preposition of verbs, he's not going to understand that. But I make it simpler for him. And I ask him, do you want to play, read, or talk? So then he says he wants to play. And there are days I reverse the question and I ask him something else. Do you want to talk? Do you want to read? Or do you want to jump? So ask the child what they want to do and start off working on that first. So this is how you take the lead. That's number 1. Number 2, if your child is not engaged with you and your child has no eye contact with you, no matter how you're going to try hard, you're not going to be able to get far too much if the child is not able to interact with you. That's when I said, if the child is playing with a pen, you play with the pen and get his attention. The first thing in order to help the child interact is get the child's attention. And how do you do it? You do what the child loves the most. And in terms of having a plan, I'm sure you all as parents have a set of things that you want to work with your child. Say, for example, you, like I mentioned, 3 things: read, play, or talk. So then you give the child what he wants to do, let him pick, and then you work on 1, 2, and 3 according to what the child wants to do with you. So you eventually, so you start with basic engagement where you play what the child is playing and you build on that. I'm not asking you to stay in the same place of spinning the wheel or biting a pen or playing tickle games or peekaboo games. You build on that. Even when I gave this example, I actually have graded looking at the wheel, playing with a pen, and then playing peekaboo. Peekaboo is social interaction. And then you go on to more complex activities that you would like to do. Build and expand. Build and expand. It has to go vertically up and also horizontally to the sides. Build and expand. But the key is interacting with the child constantly, engaging with the child that you're working with. Any other questions?
Yeah, the next question is what can I do for delayed echoalia? My son repeats past events and rhymes he's heard.
Okay, I think by now you should have got the answer and you should actually be posting that answer in the chat. Interact and engage with your child. That's all you need to do. When he's bringing something from the past, for example, maybe you went on a holiday and he brings something from there, you say, oh, are you remembering the elephant that we saw? Wow, what else did you do with the elephant? Interact and build communication and expand that. So maybe he's thinking of an old friend. Maybe he's thinking of a place that you all enjoyed at. So try to bring back that memory and build on that. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's another question from Sri Arjun. He'd like to put it across themselves. So if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, ma'am. I have a question. Like, I got the answer for that, as you said, engage the kid. One more thing, he wants to know what I am doing. Like, for example, whenever I fill the filter, water filter, he wants to know what exactly happening in it. Like, he doesn't ask questions like what's happening or what, or those WH kind of questions, but it's like he'll say something and looks at me. So what
Okay.
I understood is like he wants to know about it. So I said like, I want to know about filter. When I put that question in his mind, I want to know. So he started asking me whenever I fill the filter. So I told about the filter, how it's going, what it's going in it. So now what he's doing is he's applying the same thing everywhere. Whenever he see water, like while bathing, he'll hold the mug and he'll say what all I said. A few words he'll pick it up and he'll say that. And one more example, while eating, he'll say something about the carrot. So I put the question. I put the question, why we are eating carrot. So and also I'll after some time I'll say like carrot is good for health. So that carrot is good for health, he will apply for everything. Like the plate is good for health, the bottle is good for health. It's like irrelevant. So this is happening everywhere. He doesn't want to stay home, so he'll hit the wall. So I go to him and I'll say, I don't want to I want to go out. I'll model him like what he wants to say. I want to go out. I want to go out. So after some time, I'll answer like, house is the safest place where we can live. So the same sentence he'll apply everywhere. Like the bowl is the
I'm
safest
not
place.
able to actually get your question. There are a lot of examples you've given me, but
Yeah.
if you could give me a question.
So here, how can I understand him and how can I correct him and how can I put him in a right path? So this is what happening in my child.
Okay, so you're saying that he is interacting. For example, you say carrot is good for health, then he says plate is good for health, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
he's overgeneralizing what you have told him. See,
yes.
this is also something that you typically see when there is a delay in language and the child is trying to rehearse and understand. So what I see here is the child is trying to memorize things by rote, because even the example that you gave about filter, I want to know about filter. Do you think he's understood every statement you've made there? I doubt, because for a child with limited vocabulary, I want to know how it works. That is way too complex, given all the
Okay,
examples that you've stated, for him to comprehend that. So when children don't comprehend, sometimes they try to use it in different settings, in a wrong, what I wouldn't say wrong, in a non-meaningful way. That's why he says um, plate is good for health, which means the
okay,
child is not understood what is good for health,
okay.
right? So
Yeah,
you probably have to simplify your language. And what I feel is you're trying to work on skills that are way above the child's level. You're
okay,
working at a very high level, and the child is not yet there. It's like a child who's in LKG has to read grade 5 subject. It's not possible. And I think that's where your child is in now. He's first need to understand what is good for health, right? So
Right,
probably you need to interact with him more simpler language forms, very basic things that he can see, feel, and interact with, and he understands what he's doing. Then you won't see these echolalia and repetitive speech that is meaningless.
Okay, okay, got it. Thanks, ma'am. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have two more questions. One, so how can we teach meaningful interaction to a child, but if he doesn't interact meaningfully with the world outside, will he ever survive?
I didn't get your question. Can you please repeat?
Yeah. Can Seema Singh, can you elaborate on what you want to ask?
లేదులే లేదులే నాన్న నాన్న వద్దులే అమ్మ అమ్మ వచ్చేసింది ఓకే
If Seema Singh is here, could you please elaborate on your question?
Hello?
Yeah, I think there's a...
Hello, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes,
We
please
can
go
hear-
ahead.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Ma'am, my concern is that my child is not able to communicate with the world outside. I may be able to communicate with him a little bit, like doing a lot of eye contact with him and like whatever little I know, I keep on applying on him. But otherwise, he simply doesn't know how to play with kids, how to speak to others. Suppose I'm always concerned if he gets lost, it's going to be very difficult for me to get him back. So
Okay.
that's my major concern. Echolalia is okay, all right, that the child is repeating everything, but it doesn't help him with his survival skills. So
Okay.
the interaction is a must. Are there any strategies, any books, any resources that you can suggest?
Sure, sure. I think this question is not pertaining to echolalia, but you're asking a question on how we can build functional communication in the child, where
But
he will
ma'am,
be able
language
to
actually
interact with the world
is
outside, right?
his language problem is because of this echolalia only. He speaks a lot. He's a verbal child. He knows everything, and though he is not able to connect the sentences meaningfully because of the lack of the knowledge of grammar and nouns and pronouns and all that. So he is not able to communicate with the people outside. He is not able to play, and in
Yeah.
fact,
So let me
there's another
answer
question
you.
which is, Anji ma'am, boli.
Yes, let me answer you. See, first thing is children need to build meaningful communication with immediate family members, and they need to start feeling comfortable and confident there. The child must enjoy talking, communicating, and interacting with you. If the child is able to do that, only after that, the child is going to interact with the world outside. If the child is going to have difficulty in trusting and building meaningful communications with immediate family members, then it can be a challenge even to communicate outside. Like I mentioned earlier, since there's a lot of repetitive speech as per what you mentioned, and there is echolalia, repetitive speech to a very large extent, in that case, I mentioned earlier that you need to work on receptive language. You need to help the child to understand the meaning of language. For that, you will need the help of a speech language pathologist. And you need to do a detailed evaluation and understand what is his receptive language level, what is his expressive language level, and what are the foundation skills you need to build on. It's like a house will be strong only when the foundation is strong.
What evaluation did you say, ma'am? DDL?
Speech and language evaluation with the speech therapist. You need to get that done.
Okay, ma'am. And where can I get one? Somewhere
You're
Chandigarh?
always welcome to Dimension Center for Child Development. We're doing teletherapy. So wherever you are, we can provide therapy for you. And if you're comfortable doing it in your own language, in your own city, please look for an SLP, speech language pathologist or speech therapist who can help you do this assessment and build receptive language.
Okay, ma'am, I'll be very grateful if you could provide me the number of a few language pathologists.
We can do that at Nayi Disha. Ambika and I will be sharing our contacts, so you can ask us directly for a speech language pathologist. We'll try and help you from our side.
Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are all the questions. Thank you, Chitra.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chitra. We will share the feedback with you as well. We and Aishwarya will definitely have the recording available. So yeah, Aishwarya, maybe you were going to close. I'll let you close the session. So yeah.